Right now, one narrow stretch of water, which is only 21 miles wide, could crash the entire global economy. And it is happening. Nearly one-fifth of the world's oil, the blood of modern society, passes through it every single day. And today, that passage is under threat. The war in the Middle East, between the US, Israel, and Iran, broke out 2 weeks ago. It is escalating fast. Tankers are burning. Ships are trapped. Global oil prices are exploding. And if this tiny choke point closes completely, gas prices around the world could continue skyrocketing. So the question is, could the Strait of Hormuz trigger the next global economic crisis, like the Great Depression 100 years ago? And even more importantly, will this war accelerate China's rise or America's decline? And the answers to those questions could reshape the balance of power in the world. Most people have never heard of the Strait of Hormuz. But if you ever drive a car or buy anything shipped overseas, your life depends on it. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow channel between Iran and Oman. At its narrowest point, it's barely 21 nautical miles wide. And yet through this tiny corridor flows an astonishing amount of energy. Every single day, about 20 million barrels of oil pass through the strait. That's about 20% of global oil consumption. But oil isn't the only thing moving through. Around 20% of global liquefied natural gas also passes through the same waters. Oil tankers, gas carriers, container ships, energy for Asia, energy for Europe, energy for the world. In other words, the Strait of Hormuz is the main artery of the global energy system. And when arteries get blocked, the consequences can be catastrophic. The crisis began with a war. In late February 2026, the United States and Israel launched major military strikes against Iran and killed its supreme leader and dozens of high-rank officials. Iran responded immediately. Missiles, drones, and attacks on shipping. The conflict escalated fast. According to reports, thousands of U.S. airstrikes have already been launched. And Iran has vowed retaliation against American forces and shipping routes, refusing to surrender. Soon after the war began, the world's most important oil corridor became a battlefield. Commercial ships were attacked. Oil tankers were set on fire. Naval mines were deployed. And suddenly, the Strait of Hormuz was no longer safe. Iran warned vessels not to enter the waterway without prior authorization. Some ships ignored the warning. One oil tanker was struck by a drone and caught fire. Shipping companies immediately reacted. Insurance costs skyrocketed. Cargo vessels stopped entering the strait. And within days, global shipping through Hormuz almost completely halted. The economic consequences were immediate. When oil stops moving, prices explode. And that's exactly what happened. Global oil prices surged past $100 per barrel. Energy markets panicked. Stock markets dropped. And economists warned this could become the largest oil disruption in history. Millions of barrels per day suddenly disappeared from global supply. According to energy analysts, the war could remove up to 8 million barrels per day from global production. That's massive. To understand the scale is not easy. We need a quick comparison. During the 1973 oil crisis, a much smaller supply disruption triggered a global recession. Today's world is even more dependent on energy. Transportation, manufacturing, shipping. Everything runs on fuel. So when oil prices surge, the effects ripple across the entire economy. Gas prices rise. Food prices rise. Airline tickets rise. And suddenly, everyone on Earth feels the impact. And the disruption isn't just about prices. It's about logistics. Right now, dozens of ships are stuck outside the Persian Gulf. Tankers are waiting. Cargo vessels are waiting. Insurance companies refuse coverage. And shipping companies are afraid to send vessels into a war zone. The result? A massive maritime traffic jam. One of the biggest energy disruptions in decades. The longer it continues, the worse the consequences become. Because global supply chains depend on constant movement. And when movement stops, the entire system begins to break down. Now the situation is entering an even more dangerous phase. The United States Navy is considering escorting oil tankers through the Strait of Hormuz. But the chief of the U.S. War Department says it's not the right moment yet. In other words, American warships could soon be protecting commercial vessels inside a combat zone. Whether it's lip service depends on the evolving situation. The Iranian military announced that U.S. Navy ships were over 600 kilometers away from Iran's waters. Moreover, Iran has thousands of naval mines, missile batteries along the coast, drone swarms, fast attack boats, and submarines. Even a small skirmish could trigger a massive naval battle. And if American ships are attacked, the United States could escalate further, till it runs out of munitions, which brings us to the real fear. The conflict is no longer just a regional war. Some are spreading rumors that Iran may attack California, though most people know Iran does not have long-range missiles now. They may not have those weapons today. But how about tomorrow? America's homeland may not be safe for much longer. Here's why the Strait of Hormuz crisis is so dangerous. It doesn't just affect the Middle East. It affects the entire planet. Because Asia depends heavily on oil through the Hormuz Strait. Nearly 90% of the oil that passes through the strait is shipped to Asian markets, including China, Japan, India, and South Korea. All of those countries rely heavily on this energy corridor. And China is the single biggest customer. About 37% of oil exports through Hormuz are destined for China. That means China has enormous exposure to this crisis. If the strait stays closed, China's economy could face serious pressure. Energy shortages, higher manufacturing costs, slower growth. However, some reports indicate Iran has signaled that Chinese vessels could receive priority access through the strait during the crisis. Sources say Tehran may allow only Chinese-owned or Chinese-linked vessels to pass, as a gesture toward Beijing, which has maintained supportive relations with Iran during the conflict. Other reports say Chinese and Russian ships may be permitted, while others are blocked. It reflects a key geopolitical reality. China is Iran's most important oil customer. China buys a large share of Iran's sanctioned crude and remains one of Tehran's most important economic partners. As a result, the crisis created more opportunities than exposures for China. Many analysts are asking a fascinating question. Could this crisis actually accelerate China's rise? Because while the United States is fighting a costly war in the Middle East, China is watching carefully. Historically, great powers decline when they become trapped in expensive wars. The British Empire experienced this after World War II. The Soviet Union experienced this after the Afghanistan War. And now some experts wonder whether the United States could face similar pressures. War is expensive. Military operations, logistics, weapons, reconstruction. All of it costs money. Meanwhile, China continues investing in infrastructure, technology, and trade. If the conflict drags on, the economic balance of power could shift. It is where geopolitics becomes fascinating. The United States remained the dominant global military power until it initiated the Iran war for Israel. It had the world's largest navy until China's super destroyers began splitting waves. It controlled hundreds of overseas bases until the Iran war, when some countries, including Saudi Arabia and Spain, forbade the U.S. from using bases on their lands to attack Iran. And it had powerful alliances until February 28, 2026, when its closest ally questioned the legality of attacking Iran without UN authorization and Congress approval. Before the Iran war, the US was already in decline. The Iran war may not accelerate the decline, but it told the world a true United States. If the US decides to reopen the Strait of Hormuz by force, oil prices stabilize. Scenario 2: Limited military confrontation. The United States escorts tankers. Skirmishes occur, but the strait eventually reopens. Scenario 3: Full escalation. The Strait of Hormuz becomes a permanent battlefield. Global energy markets collapse, and the world enters a major economic crisis. Which scenario happens may determine the future of global power. Will the war end shortly as the US wishes? Instead of answering this question, people should ask: if your country were Iran, and lost your supreme leader, dozens of high-rank officials, and nearly 200 students, who could not open their eyes again after a missile hit the Shajar Tayyebe girls' elementary school during school hours. And if the new supreme leader your country chose also lost his father, mother, sister, wife, son, brother-in-law, nieces and nephews, and he himself was injured in the strikes, and the aggressor wanted you to surrender unconditionally, as Japan did in 1945, would you agree? My answer would be absolutely no. So the war will not end tomorrow or next week. And the Strait of Hormuz will not open anytime soon. It is just a narrow strip of water. But today it sits at the center of a global storm. War, energy, economics, superpower rivalry, all converging in one place. If the conflict escalates, the consequences could reshape the world. Oil markets, global trade, and the balance of power between the United States and China.